Hey there, everybody. It's Jenny Clark with Solvability. This is another session of GovCon Summit. And today we're so excited to have Curtis Taylor of Link Research and Michael Sanders of Interactive Government Holdings to talk to us a little bit about what it takes to get to the Inc. 5000 list. When I was organizing this event, I thought, what would be a measure that I could use that somebody else has already measured that says this is a successful company? I did some studying and I found that I could identify my theory and make sure it was right by looking at the Huntsville companies, because of the companies in Alabama on the Inc. 5000 list that were on the government services, they were all government contractors. There were over 20 of them. And I actually saw a pattern of being part of an organized group of people and could see this is really a good measure of growth. Most of them are in the engineering services or services NAICS, the 541XXX NAICS codes, which is really the largest one anyway. So that makes a lot of sense. Michael Sanders, you're in the Northern Virginia area and have been very active in the veterans procurement program up there and have a lot to share. So what I'd like you each to do is first introduce yourself, and then I'll come back and let you just talk a little bit about what it took. Curtis, do you mind giving us a start?
Sure. And Jenny said, I'm Curtis Taylor. I've spent most of my life in the NASA universe, working as a subcontractor for NASA, and then a few years working in Army missile programs. I started out early in the shuttle days. If you look back over my my right shoulder, you can see some older, back behind me altogether, some older shuttle awards and such. I did that till about 2002, and then I went to work for a small company, and that's where I learned about the process of growing a small company and getting it to a point where, you know, you're meeting large goals. You're able to figure out how to sustain the personnel, sustain the contract, work with contractors and government officials, and then from that led me to start Link Research. Now it's kind of a dual reason I started Link Research. I had been working, if you're familiar with Huntsville, there's about 5 cotton mill villages that are kind of areas of town where, and from about the 1920s to the late 50s, there was a lot going on where there's cotton produced, and there were these mills, huge mills, that turning things into textiles, yarn, things like that. And when the cotton went away, the cotton went away because the rocket scientists started coming in the late 50s. This is where the German rocket team landed for their first real applied work here at in the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, and subsequently when NASA started up. I don't like when these pop-ups come up. Anyway, so when everybody exited and suburbanized, it left the mill villages standing without much support. The people who couldn't afford to move out didn't move out, and consequently they all became basically kind of inner city areas. So I started working with a ministry in this particular area in Lincoln Village in the early 2000s. And from there, I got my thought process to grow and start a company right here in the middle of Lincoln Village. So that's how we started Link. We've had since the very beginning 2 mission statements. One is to be problem solvers. I've been working in technology programs with NASA and DoD since about 2002. And it's not all about inventing things. You can invent all day long, but if you don't solve a problem, it just kind of sits on the shelf or goes into the valley of death. So we look at everything in terms of solving problems. And the other part of that is being a participant in helping these underutilized utilized neighborhoods actually flourish. So that's kind of where we are.
Well, Curtis, now I know where you got the term link research. I was wondering about that.
Yeah,
Um,
LINC, yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to have what in mind you want to accomplish through your business as including in your business. So Michael, talk to us a little bit about what you got started with Interactive Government Holdings and where it is today and what you're doing.
Excuse me. Sure. Around 2003, 2002, there were some rumblings that President Bush was going to sign an executive order allowing 3% of all government spending to go to service-disabled veteran-owned firms. I did some quick math of what 3% of what the federal budget was that year, and it was a lot of zeros and a lot of commas, and thought to myself, well, I'm a disabled vet, that this should be pretty easy, not knowing that there was thousands and thousands of disabled vets that had been number one, working and lobbying to get the designation for veterans itself, and then also there would have to be this whole time of integrating how the program would actually work, and how it would be beneficial to veterans and to service disabled owned veterans. But initially my thought was to do some similar work that I had done with a business partner, which was more website, email type stuff, and very quickly realized that to get a system into an agency costs a lot of years and probably many millions of dollars in development and governance and paperwork and compliance paperwork and BAs and QAs and all this stuff. And so I moved over to services around 2006. Started winning little prime contracts with one person, two people, three people. I had three people who worked at a warehouse in NIST. It was a 3-month contract that got extended a month at a time for 18 months. So it was, awful, but I couldn't say no to the revolving income, so at the time. And, we grew kind of 10%, 20% year over year from, 2004 until about 2014, 15. And around then was when we won a $50 million contract with DOD. It's 173 FTE. It was in every state, territory, and District of Columbia. And so we had to learn to scale very quickly, and how to, ensure that work was getting done across a broad swath of geography, and in a lot of different commands. And that's a very interesting program because, the adjutants generals in every state are interested. A lot of the governors are interested in the program. Then you have, the commands, which are interested, and then you have state chairs, which are usually former tags, there's a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people that are, have input into that program. So you kind of have to be everywhere at once and make sure that everything is happening, in terms of delivery of requirements, all the time. So that it was a good learning experience. And then 3 years later, we got severely undercut on the recompete. Had to make drastic cuts, but we grew back through that, and now we're at a good place where we're growing about 40 to 60% year over year. We have an excellent management team. I have a fantastic CFO, chief growth officer. I have a great proposal team, and excellent HR, and so we're in a really good spot. I like to say the company could run without me, which is a great place to be if you're a small business owner. It means that you can't actually, have dinner with your family and not answer your phone, or maybe even take a day off every now and again. So that's where we are. We're in a good spot. I tell people that the company's in a good place because, someone that's talented can come here and make a lot of impact and, go take the company in, whatever direction they had, specialty or expertise in, and, and we could grow that way. So I think it's been critical to recruiting high level talent.
Well, it does seem like that's a big part of it, getting the company to the point where you as the founder and executive can be thinking about the vision things and not doing all the work. And it's so, I feel like the main place that I want to be able to help people is figure out how to accelerate that process when they can. At the same time, you have to have the business, you have to have the sales, you have to have the revenue coming in before you can afford to put in the infrastructure. And the other part about it is you get to the point where you've had some success, then first person you want to hire is another business developer. And then you've still got to get your human resources, your accounting, your program management, contracts, and all of that. The biggest challenge that I find for small businesses and federal contracting is finding that professional staff, unless you're in a place like Huntsville or you're up in the area that you guys are, because that's really what's unique about government contracting that people don't understand. You want to find people that are from inside the industry, but that's severely undercut. That's like having your veins cut, isn't it? Has that ever happened to you, Curtis? I think you're in a very specialized area. How do you find the work that's going to be sustainable, where it's technically what you want to do and the pricing they're buying for quality, or do they? How do you do it? You're on mute.
Yeah, you're right. You need some structure there. For me, I've got a really good lead over technology and engineering, and I don't have to put my hands into the daily machinations that go on there. I guess as you can see, shuttle program, I'm old, so so I've gained a lot of contacts over the years and found ways to get into different paths that have enabled us to reach a lot more markets, especially in the NASA and DoD arena. This morning before I was on here, I was looking at cyber topics and seeing what we could do there. We've won one cyber from a cyber. Then from this last cyber we won, it ended up transitioning not to a phase 2, but to a subcontract with the Army, where we're able to expand our technology a little further. But you got to have, the head person's got to have his fingers in a lot of pies, and you've got to, you just have to be aggressive about getting in there and trying to turn over those leads in those departments, and then being smart about it. You don't go to find a friend or somebody, a friend of a friend that's an engineer in an organization, and ask them about where do I go to talk acquisition. And same way, you don't go to procurement, somebody who's listed as the procurement contact, and ask them about how many pounds force you need on a damper. So it's about aggressively placing yourself, stretching out, but also being smart about that. You don't want to waste people's time and ask questions that may go nowhere.
Well, I think what you're really talking about is doing your homework and knowing your industry very well and building those relationships. And we had a session yesterday with Josh Frank talking exactly about that when people are just randomly going out and looking for work, they're not successful because they're not investing in something they can really grow in. Mm-hmm. And Michael, I think you've probably got a lot to add to that with how you chose which direction to go.
Yeah, so I agree with Curtis. And I've had this conversation with my C-suite, with my my financial officer, my growth officer, our VP of quality, and it's kind of like, what's your expectation of me as a CEO? Do you want me to be inward facing or outward facing? And they feel like that I should be out, being the voice of the face of the company, doing these types of summits, doing podcasts, going, when they're pre-COVID going to industry days. But even those, like Curtis said, when I first started out, years and years ago, you'd go and, you'd collect like 200 cards and they would all go nowhere because it would all be, you'd meet a guy from booze and you call him, hey, I have this opportunity. And, he was the booth guy. So of course he's not the decision maker of booze. He's probably been there at booze as long as I've had my company at that point, And so, for me, I took kind of a different route, which was priming, very small, then medium, then big, in terms of contract size. And then once I was large enough to where, I could, not have to depend on a large business, I started doing more subbing, and it was actually kind of nice because the large businesses started coming to us because of our reputation within a certain vertical, and because of the directors and some of the SESs that we had worked with and recommended us, after they left. So, so I totally agree that you have to, I call it like being a pilot and flying with your controls as opposed to looking at the horizon. Once you're doing a few $1 million a year, you just can't keep all the inputs and outputs in your head. I mean, even a few $100,000 a month is impossible. I mean, you have to learn to look at your controls, which is your financials. You have to look at your quality controls, your HR, and figure out what reports are meaningful to your business and are aligned with your strategy. And then you have to align your incentives, with your strategy, which is, all the way down the line. And if you can get all those things lined up, it's like putting the Rubik's Cube, all the pieces together. I think I still got that one random yellow part somewhere, so it's not perfect, but you get better as you hire, as you learn, and as you make mistakes.
Well, I liked what you said, that you have to be flying the plane, not looking at the horizon, but checking the controls and looking across it, because it gives a great example of how many components of flying that plane are important all at once. And you're looking, okay, is my oil pressure okay? Or is my altitude right? And that's exactly what we're talking about as far as on a regular basis, meeting with your team and saying, where are we? Where do we need to go? And I do like the idea of what you're saying, of being the face of the company, knowing that you've got to be the one that they see as out front, looking on to see what's available coming into the future. I got a couple other questions. Curtis, you mentioned SIBRs, and yesterday we had a great session with Al Mink, who was out of Air Force, and he's talking about DevSecOps, which he was also talking about the Air Force and all these little software factories around. And I was stunned when he was talking to me about them going away from the large contracts, the large prime contracting, and having an innovator sit next to an airman. And I'm like, has anybody told the people that are getting these SIBRs about that happening? And we've got a session on Friday about both of those topics. But I know that when I've gone back and looked at the companies that have been successful, I look at the SIBR program, because SIBR is what makes companies exceptional. So tell me a little bit about how you see a path forward with the SIBR program.
Well, I would recommend to anybody, I'm on, right? Yeah. Start with AFWorks. That's the Air Force's innovation lab. They have a low barrier to entry, and you can do you can propose, basically they got one topic. It's called, I think it's called CSO1 or something like that. But if you open it up, they just came out yesterday, day before yesterday, and it's an innovative open topic, dual use SIBR. And all you have to do is basically provide a good idea. It's not your classical phase one where you have to have a proof of concept for a technology or software or something like that. You just have to have proof of an idea that somebody is interested in the DoD. So it goes for 3 months, $50,000. But the purpose of it is for you to find a DoD customer who says, yes, we think we can use that, and then kind of getting down to the nitty gritty and proposing on a phase 2, a follow-on phase 2, which then gives you ability to get up in the neighborhood of 1.5 million to go actually flesh out the idea and do a really good end-to-end program where you produce at least a full-scale prototype, if not, full-scale prototype at TRL 6 or 7 kind of result, so that phase 3 you can go fly it.
Well, that sounds really good, and that's part of our topics tomorrow with it. So I'm glad to know that it's getting out there. The other thing people talk to me about, and Michael, I wonder what you're doing in this area, is about all small joint ventures and all small mentor protege. Have you had any luck with any of those programs, or what do you see is a good way for people to find teaming partners, or how do you go after it? Because they always say to me, it doesn't do me any good to have a teammate if I don't have an opportunity.
So with the all small joint venture, what our legal counsel has told us is that really that joint venture begins when the opportunity drops, because the joint venture has to be around an opportunity. Once that opportunity is gone, whether you win or lose, you can continue to operate the joint venture if you go after other opportunities. But as I understand it, that's and yes, we did about, I want to say $7 million in joint venture revenue over the last couple of years. Not a ton of money, but they were set asides through STARS 2, and it got us past performance in modernization and Salesforce and RPA, and then on several different systems at the agency in which we won the award. So I think the key to successful joint venturing is, I mean, it's really like putting together an executive team, right? Like, you don't want all the people that have all the same strengths, right? Like, if we're all great technical writers and no one's a seller, no one knows how to make it sexy. We're going to be boring. Our proposal is going to be compliant, but it's going to be boring. And so you want to put your joint venture team just like you put together your executive team, just very thoughtfully and based on mitigating weaknesses and amplifying strengths, and and showing that together you make a complete team that offers the best value to the government.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And just for clarify for the people that might not know, the all small mentor protege, you form JVs, and the joint venture form inherits the qualifications of the small. So if there's an 8A, STV, OSB, woman owned, and things like that are part of it, that's a lot of opportunities. And where it really helps 8As is because they have to show commercial revenue after a period of time. Anything run under the joint venture is commercial revenue. So that's really helpful. Love to hear from you, Curtis, about IDIQs. So I've been talking to people that are going after one that's called CIOSP4, which you may not be specifically on. But what I'm looking at is the requirements that are coming out so these companies can get points are things that a small business can't get or shouldn't be asked to get. One said something about an estimating system, which you normally don't have to have until you're CAS compliant, and different, and small businesses normally don't have. Are you seeing things that are challenges to small business that, like, wait a minute, I don't know how they can do that? You're on mute, sorry.
Keep on doing this. Well, if you're in DOD, your biggest problem is going to be CMMC certifications. That's an expensive process. I know the DOD is looking at it. I think that's their number one concern for small businesses is how do we do that? Definitely. And I think some level of that CMMC requirement is going to hit all federal agencies. The threat is very significant, very real. You've seen it just lately, like the solar winds thing through, perfectly good organizations, they bring down, huge companies. I think from a realistic standpoint and a requirement standpoint, CMMC is going to be the biggest challenge going forward.
Well, when we talk about CMMC, I've been telling people that if a company has a lot of activity where they're doing work that's high level systems or particularly that requires clearances or cybersecurity or touching IT systems, they're going to need to have that. I also talk to a lot of people that are saying, well, I don't know what it's going to take and I'm just going to wait and see. But the thing about it is you got to get to a certain, you got to start investing now so it doesn't become an emergency. Are you expecting companies to drop out of the defense industry because they won't be able to hit, say, CMMC level 3 and compete with companies that are mature like you guys are?
I haven't thought about that. I don't see how that, I mean, I can see that coming, some attrition. But if you take it step by step. I mean, everybody should try to get their level 1 right out the gate. It's something you probably can do if you've got somebody on the inside of your company that has some IT level expertise. The whole thing about that is level 1 is getting a system where at least you can talk and CUI, controlled unclassified information. And there are offices, that won't even talk to you now unless you are able to work in a CUI environment. I mean, you can't even get marketing information.
Okay, well, that's good information. Michael, I bet you've got a lot to say on this topic because you've got more background in it, right?
Well, I don't know if I have no more background than Curtis. I mean, he seems like like you said, he's been around a good amount of time. But I did think to myself and expressed to my team that I felt like there would be an early mover advantage to CMMC. That although it would be maybe a little rough to roll out, that those companies that were in the first round to get level 3 would be privy to opportunities that people had been working capture on for a while, and then all of a sudden had a CMMC label slapped on it. And so for me, we started investing in it. I mean, it's very much like ISO or CMMI. You have to find a company that's going to help you get ready for the audit, and then you have to find right now they have a provisional auditors, of course, but Curtis was right. I mean, the first CMMC 1 is like 13 steps, and I mean, part of it's like multi-factor authentication, which if you're an owner and you use 365, there is a ton. I mean, it seems like to me when I went back into the security module at 365, like they almost got it ready for CMMC. I went in there and with no training ran a phishing test on my entire company, sent out phishing emails. It told me who opened the email, who clicked on what, nobody failed. If they would have failed, they would have been directed to take a phishing training. So there's a lot of things that if you're an enterprising owner and you want to save some money, go into the security module, take some trainings on Office 365. Most of it, if not all of it's free. That way when someone comes to sell you, packages, and we looked at companies, probably 4 companies, and got full quotes on, from start to finish, getting us ready for audit, and then remediation after the audit. And those price tags were from like, 3,800 to like 75,000 or 80,000. I mean, really, yeah, and yeah, I mean, and there was some variation. That's not apples to apples, of course. The 3,800 was to write our NIST 800 policy, which is kind of the basis for your next thing, right? And then, there were some other things, but we ended up kind of going in the middle of the road for a middle of the road company. And all inclusive, getting ready for the audit for level 3 was going to be about 36,000. And we started paying for it in January, and we expected to be done sometime in May or June. And that way it wasn't a big hit to the balance sheet or to the P&L. And we were able, and also it didn't suck up a lot of human time, billable time, where somebody could be doing something that was earning you money instead of costing you money.
Well, that's a good point, and that's very reassuring to see that they're, how you've approached. And I really do agree with that first mover advantage. I think that everything that comes out when there's um, work coming up, everybody tries to put in something that will exclude something that somebody else doesn't have. Another big issue that people talk about these days is past performance and CPARs and how to manage that, because these bigger IDIQ projects are using the points system for it. And a lot of what you're doing in government contracting, gee, I wish I'd planned that 2 years ago, right? Curtis, can you think of anything like that that has really had a impact on your company that you're like, gosh, I was sure a visionary then. I figured it out ahead of time, right?
Right. Well, I'm going to make one comment on that topic, and it was just approved from the NDAA 2021 was the requirement for prime contractors to give first tier subcontractors the CPARs if they ask for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so that opens up a whole, because once you start looking at bidding on contracts, you'll see the past performance, and the CPARs is the gold standard for that past performance capability. So yeah, but you gotta, as of the environment, previously you had to have your own prime contract to get a CPARs. So it's almost chicken and egg. You can't get one unless you have a prime contract. And if you want to win a prime contract, you may have to have a CPARs.
Right. And so,
But to your question, other things like that, things you run into is there's it seems like there's kind of a unwritten change in the company. It's almost like you don't go along smoothly from 0 to 50 people. It's somewhere in there, all of a sudden, you take this big bump of people, more support you need. Then you start to have a look at writing EEOC kind of stuff. And, so you got to be prepared for those bumps. And you just got to be looking ahead and see what other people are doing.
well, I think that's a really good point. I call that cost or lumpy. Because you get to a certain point, you hit 50 employees, there's more requirements that you have to do. Then you start outgrowing stuff, and okay, we've been around 3 years, a bunch of people are new, we got to buy them computers, we can bring them on, we can do these things. And then, we need new servers, we need new access. And then I guess the other thing is probably everybody that's on your team starts saying, we need to spend money on X. And you're like, who do I look like? Michael, have you run into that?
I have a great team. My CFO says, she needs more beans. She's a bean counter, and don't give her beans away because she needs to count them. Even my EA will tell me no if the hotel that I want is too expensive. I'll just be like, book it, and she'll say no. You can find a nice hotel right down the road for $200 cheaper or something. And so I have a great team in that regard. Is that they're looking out for the well-being of the company. I mean, as am I, of course, but it's not a team that says like, I used to give an example of, employees like wanting to put, expensive framed pictures up all around the office of the Capitol or whatever, like it doesn't make you money, and that's kind of one of my lessons learned, when I do panels by myself. It's kind of like, if it doesn't make you money, you really don't need it. Until you're at, until you're very, very comfortable. There's a lot of things you do not need, and Curtis was right. There are these bumps where, you go from maybe 5 to 50 or, 50 to 150 or, we have a couple of proposals out now that have, several hundred people on them. And we'll have to scale, each of our various divisions to support that, and if we lose it, we'll have to scale down those various divisions in order, to be the right size. Because I mean, as a government contractor, in order to be competitive, you have to have the right overhead, fringe, G&A for the size you are in the market you're in order to be competitive. And so, if your ego is saying, well, I was a $50 million company before I lost that, before I lost that contract, and you don't scale down, you're going to be a $0 company because you're going to have way too much cost, for what your contracts can support. So, I think it's an important lesson that if you lose a contract, you need to look long term how it's going to affect your operations, and what don't you need anymore, that was supporting that contract.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to you looking at your controls, not the horizon, and being sized. And I always tell people that if there's a rule of thumb to me, it's that for every 10 or 12 people, you might have one admin. And sometimes the admin is the executive of the company when you're starting out and you're wanting to grow. You've got to really balance that out and figure out how you can automate or do different things to keep it all in check. And people will also ask me, what am I bidding? It's like, well, it's a heck of a lot different if you're bidding cybersecurity specialists at Langley versus dock workers in California. So you got to be really focused on your market and understand what's going to be playing in your market. And it kind of kills me to see how people have to bid on these big IDIQs that ask you to staff these people in every place and average it for the universe, because that doesn't really exist. Love to ask you guys both to wrap up by talking a little bit about how you were affected by a global pandemic that threatened the company and the country and our families and everything else. Curtis, I think the main thing that I saw in the executives in the federal space was just staying strong and communicating well. What was the biggest challenge and how did you overcome it?
Luckily, all of our people on contract work for the company kept going through work on federal contracts. So at least securing the revenue we had before COVID started, we had that. So that was a breath. And then after, you just got to figure things out in the first few months, what works best, things like, but what I worried about the most was my people. Are they, when they work from home, do they go further and further into themselves, depression, anxiety, things like that, and things that are now being found, that there's a high level. I mean, the level of depression, anxiety is out the roof right now among people. I experienced a little bit of that. So I guess from my standpoint, my biggest worry were my people. Were they thriving? Were they safe? We had a few people that did come down with COVID during the process, and we did give extra COVID leave, even though there's a way to recover that through tax rebates. And when you file your quarterly taxes, it came down to be a paperwork issue, and the amount of paperwork and tracking that are required to submit for those credits was probably worth more than the credit for us. So we just did it.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And how about you, Michael?
Along with Curtis, my big thing was there was people across the country, across contracts, that they had very different, support systems at home. We had single mothers that had 3 kids that were all home from school. We had, people that, had a lot of support. Their parents were there. They had a nanny. Both parents were able to work from home. So a lot of what we looked at was second and third order of consequences. We sent out a lot of numerous emails, kind of just saying, maybe it's not you. Of course, we were able to, like Curtis, move all our contracts over into telework agreements. But we weren't sure about our employees' spouses, you know, their parents, you know, other people they live with. So we just sent out a note and said, listen, if you're dealing with something, you know, that we don't know about, if you have an extra need, if COVID somehow hit your family in a way that we're unaware of, let us know. You know, we did like $150 grocery gift cards, $150 gas gift cards, and people just had to send in and request it, and there's no questions asked. You know, and you know, out of you know, 70, 80 employees, we had 7 requests. And one person requested it for their friend who was in New Jersey, and so since we had bought the cards anyway, we went ahead and we went ahead and sent it to the friend in New Jersey, because they both her friend and their husband had lost their job. So you know, it was just little things like that, like I said, asking people how they are, not what they're doing. You know, and I'm not a micromanager. For me, if you show up at, you know, if we're having our meetings and the work is getting done and the work product is good, then I don't really care what you're doing at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. Maybe you're walking your dog, maybe you're writing a proposal. I don't know, but it's due on Friday at noon and we've never missed a deadline. So what do I care? You know, so that's been kind of you know, my feeling. And you know, we've, as a company, have been very fortunate, and you know, me and my family have been very fortunate, and so you know, we've tried to be as supportive as possible to as many people as we can.
Well, that's a really amazing story, and I think I hear that from a lot of the people that are in this group about how important it is to take care of their employee family. So good news on that. Okay, one last question: how did it impact your BD strategy when you couldn't go to all these conferences? Did you get value out of staying connected a different way, or how did you guys like change your practice in that area, Curtis?
Oh, I hated it. I just, you know, I was at a conference in DC at the end of 2019 at National Harbor, and you know, you just don't get those catch up early morning coffees with people, or you know, that group that says let's all go out to dinner in Georgetown. And you get together, you know, 9 or 10 people who have totally different kind of connections, people you never would have met before. And you know, that's probably the biggest thing, is meeting people. I always met at conferences. I mean, I'm shy, but I'm not shy enough where I won't go try to talk with somebody that I've never met before. You know, so definitely missed that. And then here of late, it's now it's not meetings like this, not conferences like this, but work meetings. People are saying that they can check off a lot of, you know, customers saying they can check off a lot of boxes for, you know, outreach and this, that, and the other with you know, 1,000-person conferences, you know, 200-person, whatever. And it's not unusual for me to have one VideoCon conference going on my laptop and another one going on my iPad at the same time. I think I don't like that particular trend. But the bottom line is, yes, it does impact BD, and also it impacted the award of contracts too. You know, when it first started out, you know, nobody knew how they were going to do the process of vetting contracts all the way up the line, and there were less emphasis on awarding contracts, more emphasis on, you know, physical safety, fixing the situations in an office, getting everybody set up at home. So, you know, for us, there was probably about a 6-month gap of, you know, awarding new contracts.
Yeah, slows things down. Michael?
We've seen some slowdown. I mean, some stuff pushed to the right. You know, in terms of BD, you know, we've we've been in a very similar market for a few years. You know, there's some things that I've gone after 2 and 3 times now. And we're also pivoting into new markets, which is, you know, why I hired you know, chief growth officer, you know, that has been in the market for 20 some years, because you know, he just came in and started bringing deals in and bringing in relationships that he's built, you know, that I don't really have, you know, not having to think about both top line and bottom line revenue all the time has been really freeing for me, just because I know somebody else is thinking about it and they're well incentivized, you know, to get to our goal. You know, so it was like when I gave up payroll, it was awesomely freeing. You know, not that first time that payroll ran and I didn't think about it. I didn't have to move money, you know, it all happened like it was supposed to. And you know, a couple of days later, I thought about it, and I had a little bit of a panic attack. And I went, "Oh my God, I didn't do payroll," because you know, I'd been doing it for 10 years, every 2 weeks for 10 years. You know, I'd been making sure the money was there, but you know, running it. You know, and when I was able to give that up, it was awesome. So. You know, BD is kind of the same. You know, I still work the relationships that I have. But you know, like we mentioned earlier, you know, you build up, you know, the growth team and the proposal team, and now the HR team and the contracts team is suffering because they have all, you know, a sudden deluge of requests for NDAs and TAs, and you know, have you got this out yet, you know, and you know, so it's a balancing act of you know, continuously you know, building, you know, in the area in which, you know, you need to support the growth.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate both of you guys being on today and sharing your insight. Curtis Taylor with Link Research and Michael Sanders with Interactive Government Holdings. You know, you've given us a lot of great ideas to think about, and I really appreciate your time today. So I think that I think we can really teach people from the things that you shared. So thank you so much for being on today.